Our next speaker is Dr. Ann Dickerson from East Carolina University. Get her presentation set up here.
Okay, thank you. Well, my topic's a little different. I'm going to be talking about interactive driving simulators, implications for clinical use. And so I'm assume that you all know about older drivers. And simulators have are showing great promise and potential for being both an assessment and intervention tool. We know that it does, there's studies to show that there is correlation between how you drive on a simulator and how on the road. And certainly they've been used in intervention studies, particularly with stroke. The groups, there's been a lot of work, particularly with stroke, and how it can make a great tool to getting back to driving. But there are drawbacks and barriers, and probably the biggest one we all know is simulation sickness, that it is particularly worse with the older adults. And then the expense. It is an expensive tool. It's not every clinician. Okay, I'm coming from the clinician background, so it's not like every individual clinic can buy a simulator. And then there's the outcome measures. And that's really what I want to talk about. It seems like, the positive thing about a simulator is you have these objective measures. But we know from at least one study with Clausen that those objective measures aren't necessarily exactly what's going on, that the driving rehab specialist that was watching and observing the person on the simulator had a different interpretation of what the actual simulator said in terms of its objective outcomes. So first, what's the face validity of the simulator for older adults? And that was an initial study I did with 31 older adults. We had them come in and drive the simulator and ask them a question. This was a group of students. And so we asked them, is driving simulator realistic to real driving? And that white is very acceptable. And the light blue is not acceptable and probably acceptable. And so, older drivers do not see simulator as the same as driving. And whenever I work with someone on the simulator, I always preface that and prepare them, not for this particular study, but for others, it isn't like real driving because they want to tell you that it's not like a real car, and it isn't. But one of the things that was interesting in the second on this graph is how acceptable were the results of simulation to your performance. And overall, they felt like the simulator did give them feedback that was accurate about their performance. And the information was realistic to their performance. That was very high. And how acceptable is the simulator for testing driving skills. And so you got a little bit more of that not acceptable, that lighter blue column. But then we asked them, these same individuals, we asked them about performance of persons with medical conditions, and they really, how acceptable for practicing driving skills after a medical condition, and they thought that was a really good idea. And then in the middle column, identifying issues for someone with a significant medical condition, and that was, felt like this was a really good tool that would be a good tool to be able to identify problems with people with medical conditions. But the last question, should this be used for someone to identify issues that has a condition that only slightly affects driving? It was much more against using the simulator to make some decisions. So how did older adults do on performance? So this is an exploratory study about the learning effects, and where we got this study was not funded. I was working on a NHTSA study, a funded study looking at GPS. So I was going out with older adults from 60 to 79, driving with them and using GPS and paper directions and their own directions And so when they came back into the clinic, then we put them on the simulator. So these were 80 healthy older adults. They were screened with EAMS. So before I was going to get in their vehicle with no control, I made sure that I felt like they would be going to pass. We did many screening tools, but make sure that they were going to be safe drivers because I was going to be with them. And so we came back and tried all 80 on the simulator, and of course we only had 57 that actually could complete that part of the simulator study because of simulator sickness. Everybody would try it, but of course we would stop immediately if there was any signs of not being comfortable. And that's when the students would take over, and I would go back in my office and I'd hear this crash, on the simulator. There would be another crash. It's like, I've just gone out with these people, So I'm not sure I would have gone out with them if I had done the simulator first. We were looking at a run that had some critical incidents. So of course, that was what I was starting to think about. And I was seeing in the literature that people were making decisions about driving with simulation. And I was at a driver rehabilitation specialist conference, and I was talking to a therapist that was saying she puts an older adult on a driving simulator for 5 minutes, and that's as part of the assessment. And it was like, really, really? So that's when I decided that one of the studies I wanted to pursue was to look at the learning effects. So that's I'm going to be sharing some of those preliminary data. But I did have 57 who were able to do the first couple runs, and we're still analyzing the data. We do a 10-minute familiarization. We do a second drive that was complex and had lots of environment and events, and it was probably why a lot of them got sick, because we did not, if you have turns, and we know that turns are the ones that make them most get the simulation sickness, so we did not try to stop that. So on the first, with the 57 individuals, we used the simulation report. We have not looked at the driving performance observations yet. And this is just, there was no significant difference. We were looking at significant differences between the age groups, male and female, and there really wasn't. This is just some of the critical events, and there really wasn't any significant difference between 60 and 69 to 70 and 79. And these are just some of the driver simulation output that did have significance, but there wasn't anything that stands out. These are just some of, there's a lot of data on the simulator, but there really wasn't anything to really point out here. But the interesting thing is, for these, what I would say is 9 repeaters, we had 5 males and 4 females. 5 that were familiar with the technology and 4 that are unfamiliar with technology, and these were their age ranges. We had mostly 7-year-olds. It was kind of interesting. And it was only about halfway through the study with NHTSA that we had started coming back for repeaters. So we are now actually getting some more people to come back. With this, we used 2 outcome measures, both the simulator report, and then we developed a demerit kind of point system based on the critical events in the drive, and that we had 2 or 3 people watching those events. And so these are some of the critical events, and this is time 1 and time 2 for those critical events. So the lower score would be better. So people did, except for that pedestrian that was the one that people didn't get better on. And this is the participants. So time 1 is red and time 2 is blue. They weren't significant difference between time 1 and time 2 overall. But overall, for most people got better on that second. They learned on the simulator, except for participant number 5 and participant number 8. So they're the only one. They did worse on they did reverse. They made more mistakes on the second time they came on the simulator. And their ages, which is interesting, number 5 is 70 and number 8 is 73. But the interesting one is this person. This was one of my oldest, he was 79. Okay, it's not about age. But this is the now number of errors on the road. So for these 9 individuals, I went back and did the analysis for how they did on the road test with the GPS and taking all the errors together. And this is also what I'll do with the 57 people we haven't had the time to go back and analyze. But the interesting thing, and as I was getting ready and looking at this data, I looked at this last gentleman, and then I remembered my nightmare that night. He went through the reason his score is so high is he went through a red light and didn't even know it. And you know, fortunately, the other people on the road, it was clear, and we went through, and my eyes got real big, and we just continued on. But so he did the worst. If we look, he did, you know, the worst on the simulator. So it's interesting data. But the implications. So what I really want to say is even healthy older adults make mistakes on the simulator. Performances didn't seem to be based on age, gender, or familiarity with technology. And it really is, and I think it goes in line with the work that Charlene had done and that we have seen with our younger, we have for driving for ASD, that you have to really look at and watch the driver. You cannot just use that output from the simulator. The practitioners have to learn the differences between common errors with critical events and common with errors with cognitive impairment. There's actually a quality of that performance that is learned. And I think it's one of the things that makes using the simulator really difficult. You cannot just have a practitioner use the simulator or somebody watch that simulator and use that output data. It could be very dangerous. It's as dangerous as using a tool and saying these are the cutoff scores. I believe the differences between the 2 time periods support the learning curve, but the limitations, of course, right now is we have a small number of repeaters. And as I was realizing is we repeated the same scenario. So the idea, are they learning that scenario, which is very possible, are they learning how to use the technology, which is what I want to show? And so we need to change our design to make sure we're using a different scenario so that they can't predict that it's when that car is coming, that means there's going to be somebody coming out in the street. There's always a limitation of simulation stickness, and we need to do more of that on-the-road performance and then analyzing that, you know, a lot of data. So the future work, we're working on young adults and older adults and to see if there's a same or different learning curve. We want to compare the same drive and a different drive, and also we have other assessment tools that we have with these individuals that we want to look at and compare on the road. These are some of the references, and these were my collaborators, the students, that were very helpful in getting this going. So.
Do we have any questions for Dr. Dickerson? Yes, sir.
As a driver rehab specialist, we work with traumatic brain injury centers, and some of them do use the simulators. And I tried it myself. One of the fallbacks that I saw was you really don't get a true picture of everything going around. The depth perception in the full picture didn't seem to be there for me. I felt like I had to really react to make a right turn because I couldn't quite get the depth across the street. What I did like about the simulators are the ability to work on divided attention skills and the multitasking skills. When you start introducing different things to the client, such as I want you to keep at the steady speed, watch the traffic lights, the car in front brakes. I mean, all of a sudden you got all these tasks going on, and they have to do that multiple, and a lot of them have difficulty. You know, they'll run right into the car because they're looking at something else.
Well, I mean, I believe that there's an emphasis on the assessment part of using simulators when I think the intervention part is much more, going to be much more of the world for using driving simulation. You know, I think it can be there for evaluation, especially when you have somebody recovering from a medical condition. And I think, you know, I did another study with cognitive impairment, and you could see the difference in that quality of mistakes.
Well, and you do
and-
quite often see the correlation between the simulator and when you get them on the road. I mean,
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
that's
But on the other hand, it isn't exactly the same. You cannot make assumptions on it. And so that's basically what I'm just trying to show is like, be careful on how you use it, because I think sometimes we jump on this technology bandwagon. And it is a wonderful tool. And, you know, it has great potential. It's just we need to make sure that we look at it carefully and use it with great caution, because we should not be making decisions based on that performance. It's like anything. You can make a decision about it when they're out in these ends, just like you can make it on a cognitive screen if they're don't do so poorly.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
So much.